How do you book a safari? Which safari company should you book through? These are the big travel questions I'm going to be answering in today's video. But first, opening sequence. Hello wildlife watchers, nature lovers, welcome back for another Safari Insights video. If you don't know me already, my name is Jeff Hyer and I'm a certified safari addict. I've been on countless safaris throughout my lifetime and going on wildlife expeditions is my life. I live and breathe safaris. I'm also a content creator that creates social media content on, can you guess? Wildlife and ecotourism topics. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok where I share short form content telling conservation stories. Here on YouTube, I share long-form videos, including travel vlogs where I take you along for the full wildlife adventure. These are very fun, lighthearted vlogs that I love making, but I also create videos like this one where I share travel insights and answer the big questions that get asked me about my travels. Doing all of these things has led me to where I am today, which is also creating custom-made safari itineraries for people like you. If you're curious to hear more details about how I can plan a trip for you, stay tuned to the end of this video. In today's video, I'm going to answer the most common question I get asked, which is, how do you book a safari and which safari company should you book through? So if you're trying to plan a dream safari and you have no idea where to start, you're in the right place. So if you're looking to visit places like the Serengeti, Masai Mara, Amboseli, Olpejeta, Ngorongoro Crater, Zanzibar, and do things like gorilla trekking in Rwanda and Uganda, this video is for you. So I'll start by answering the question, how do you book a safari? Safaris are very challenging to plan on your own, and I do not recommend it. There's a lot to think about. Logistics are confusing, plus you can't just show up in the African bush on a whim. Figuring out all the logistics involved with planning a safari on your own would be a very complicated process. This is why you book safaris through safari companies as full encompassing experiences. Booking through a tour operator that will take care of everything from the moment you arrive to the moment you depart. Airport pickup to airport drop-off, and everything in between is covered. Accommodations, meals, park fees, safari game drives, guides, all the experiences in one package. In East Africa, you won't be able to enter the game parks without a certified guide and driver, so please don't think you can rent a car and start self-safaring through the bush. There's also many safari lodges you can't book on your own through hotel websites. They're only bookable through tour operators. Plus, why would you? You're gonna save a lot of money by booking the hotels through the tour operators because they're partnered with them. These are all reasons why you should plan to book these things all together in one package. So to book a safari, these are the first steps involved. You're gonna find a company, you're gonna reach out to them and send them an inquiry. You're going to say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I'm going on a trip with about 6 other people. We're thinking of going in July of such and such year. We want to go gorilla trekking in Uganda, and we want to visit the Serengeti. We have 10 days. You're then going to ask them to give you a quote back. Usually this introduction is done in an email, or some companies have a form that you fill out that give them enough information so that they can give you the first response back. This is all meant to kickstart the dialogue of the planning process. So a lot of people, including myself, will reach out to several at a time. It'll be the same exact parameters, and then all of these companies will give their own quotes back. This allows you to compare what kind of experience you're going to get between them, and also the cost that each company will charge you. Now that's how you do it. Now who do you send it to? Where do you start sending inquiries? If you've been to East Africa before, you would know that there are hundreds of tour operators, hundreds of safari companies. If you search tour operators in East Africa, you're gonna get thousands of results. All of these companies are competing to be the top result and get themselves in front of you. This is when the choices become overwhelming because it would take you weeks to research all of them. So how do you find the right one and what do you look for? There are many factors to consider when choosing a tour operator, such as their communication. Are they prompt? Are they making sense in their messaging? Trust me, I've exchanged dialogue with a lot of tour operators that make zero sense, which is a major red flag. Do they have trustworthy reviews? What payment methods do they accept? You guys, if they're asking for cash money on arrival, that is a major red flag, because in today's world, that is not a secure and acceptable form of payment. Who owns the company? Are they locally owned or foreign owned? Because if you didn't already know this, a lot of safari companies are foreign owned. So maybe it's important to you that you contribute back to the local economy and actually support a local operator. These are all things to consider when making the right choice. I'm here to make your life easier because I've done a lot of the research for you. I've been on dozens of safaris with all kinds of companies. Budget, mid-range, luxury, I've done it all. I've worked with smaller companies that have teams under 5 people and larger ones with over 100 guides and vehicles. To be honest, there are many I would recommend to you because I've had positive experiences with many companies, but I want to take this opportunity to share with you my most preferred tour operator in East Africa. They're called Gorilla Clock, which is a locally owned tour operator based in Uganda that services trips in Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, as well as Uganda. I've been on 3 safaris serviced by Gorilla Clock and I've had incredible experiences on each of them. They've left such a strong impression on me that they've become my go-to when planning East Africa trips. Anytime I'm in the region, I always reach out to them first because they have not let me down once. Gorilla Clock is very prompt with their communication, they highly value my needs and requests as a client, they can design a custom trip just for you and your group, they demonstrate radical hospitality in every situation, they're locally owned, and most importantly, have gained my trust. If you reach out to them, I guarantee someone will get back to you in less than 24 hours, sometimes even within minutes. I have been very impressed by how prompt they are, which is so convenient and efficient when planning. They're able to custom tailor any type of trip for you, from budget to mid-range to luxury, and they accept many forms of payment, including credit card, which to me is the most secure and convenient. So let me give you a little backstory on how I discovered them. In 2021, I went on a month-long East Africa trip to Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. I had just graduated university and I had been planning this trip for years. So I was so excited to spend a full month in the wilds of Africa. I'll admit it was 2021 and it was a very bold time to travel. There were still tons of COVID restrictions at that time. Who all remembers that era? And I ended up being one of the first tourists back in East Africa when borders opened up. I knew it was risky, but I was very determined to make it happen, so I just went for it. There were, of course, a lot of pros and cons to going at this time. Pros would be that everything was at a much cheaper rate, and cons, of course, being that there was a pandemic going on and tons of COVID obstacles in the way of this trip. The uncertainties of being able to cross borders, all the testing required was a lot. So I went into this trip with a fair bit of anxiety. So the story starts in Entebbe International Airport, where I arrived in Uganda. I arrived at about 3 a.m. at night and I was all by myself. Uganda was the first stop on my trip, so I was super excited to finally make it there, but also quite nervous with all this COVID stuff happening. To add to this anxiety, my sister and brother-in-law who were joining me for this trip were facing flight issues over in the US, and this actually caused them to be delayed by 2 days. So in my head I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be alone in this foreign country by myself for 2 full days, and I'm worried about my sister and all the travel turmoil she was facing. So at this point, I already knew that our original itinerary was not going to start on the original start date, and we were gonna have to adapt things. So as the story goes, I'm at the airport at around 3 a.m. I finally get through all the COVID obstacles. I have the proper documentation. I'm so relieved to get through. And before leaving the airport, I go to an ATM because I want to withdraw some local currency. I put in my ATM card and literally the moment I put it in, the entire airport goes black. It's almost as if putting my ATM card in this ATM prompted this power outage. The blackout only lasted about 5 seconds, but when everything turned back on, I noticed that the ATM was being fully rebooted. It had reset, which means it didn't recognize that my card was in there, which means it had already swallowed it. So I was like, great, I don't have my ATM card anymore, and I've only been here for like 5 minutes. I don't know how I'm going to withdraw local currency, and I don't have my sister or brother-in-law here to spot me for the time being. So I was really delirious from the long travel day going from the US all the way to Uganda. I was worried about my sister. I had just lost my ATM card, and I finally leave the airport. And this is when I met Paul. Paul greeted me at the airport along with the driver because he's the one who had planned my entire Uganda itinerary. So for context, I had booked this entire experience in East Africa through a larger agency, and there was a different travel planner within this agency that took care of each segment of the trip. So there was a Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania planner, and Paul was the one who planned our Uganda experience. I was his first client since the pandemic had started, and he was determined to make this a very positive experience for me. With that said, I left the airport, greeted him, and shared the news that my bank card was locked in an ATM and my travel group was experiencing flight delays and they'd be a few days late. He looked at me and said, not a problem. After that moment, he quickly and swiftly adapted our itinerary to accommodate these changes. Meanwhile, he started a side quest to retrieve my bank card. That was a whole ordeal because there was so much bureaucracy involved. Africa just moves at a slower pace and there's a lot of hoops to getting stuff like that done. We were only there for about 4 days and he was determined to get it back before we would leave. As a result, to his radical hospitality, my sister and brother-in-law would arrive a few days late and we would still go on a wonderful, incredible, life-changing experience in Uganda. Although it was cut short, we still managed to go gorilla trekking twice, experiencing the windy impenetrable forest, as well as the Ashasha sector. I was so relieved to find out we would still be able to do these experiences, and Paul made that change almost seem effortless. On top of all that, Paul simultaneously arranged all the logistics involved to get my ATM card back, which was such a relief because remember, I still had 3 weeks left of travel ahead of me. After this whole trip was a wrap, Paul and I ended up staying in touch for several months to follow. We became really good friends because the 2 days I ended up spending alone in Uganda, I was by myself, and he became my friend during this time. He took me to Mabamba Swamp where we saw the shoebill stork. He entertained me, hosted me, and made sure I was comfortable in a new place. Because he wanted me to have a really positive experience in Uganda, and although it was kind of a rocky start, I ended up falling in love with the destination. So we stay in touch and end up giving each other life updates every single month, and about a year later, Paul reaches out to me and says, "Jeff, guess what? I actually started my own tour operator, my own safari company." Immediately I was like, absolutely, that makes so much sense for you. You've been in the industry for 20 plus years. You are an expert at what you do. You 100% should start your own venture. I then remember he sent me 3 names that he was considering for his safari company. And I remember looking at them and saying, oh, Gorilla Clock sounds nice. It has a good ring to it. And then he decided that that's what it was going to be called. So I'm partially responsible for where it got its name. After a few months of him getting that launched, I decided I was ready to go on my next safari, and I immediately reached out to him first. This time it was going to be in Kenya. For me, it was actually a work trip, so it was very logistically challenging to piece this all together, but Paul took that as a wonderful challenge and made it seem effortless once again. He designed a 2-week itinerary that adapted to my needs, and he did a wonderful job from start to finish, and I had absolutely 0 complaints for that experience. A lot of the content you see from Kenya on this channel is from that safari experience. Fast forward to now, and I've officially partnered with Gorilla Clock. I love supporting locally owned tour operators that create fantastic experiences, companies that give me full confidence in sending people their way. Gorilla Clock has so many incredible reviews, not just from myself. I'm also really looking forward to supporting them because they create meaningful, intentional trips that give back. What I mean by that is that there's aspects of the itinerary that give back to conservancies, wildlife efforts, and of course, local communities. Something I always strive for is that these trips really support the guides, drivers, and hospitality workers involved. With all that said, if you reached out to Gorilla Clock yourself to start designing a trip, I guarantee you'll have a positive experience. I have vetted their services and 100% vouch for them. So if you're ready to kickstart the travel planning process, all you have to do is visit the link in the description of this video. You'll click this link and it'll take you to the Gorilla Clock contact page, and there you will fill out the inquiry form. You fill out your basic information, make sure you mention that I sent you, press send, and I guarantee someone will get back to you in 24 hours or less. Oh, aren't you excited? Consider your trip already planned. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you want to watch more Safari Insight videos like this one, don't forget to hit subscribe. I hope you have a fantastic time experiencing the wilds of Africa. Safe travels, and I'll see you next time.